We just got confirmation on the two new lenses to be announced alongside the Canon EOS R7 and the Canon EOS R10 on May the 24th. Details coming up, but first I encourage you to subscribe and choose all notifications so you're kept informed on the latest camera gear, news, and rumors. On May the 10th, Canon Rumors put out a very interesting post that we're getting two brand new cameras for the R system, two brand new kit lenses for those two new cameras, and we're getting a new mount. Now those two new cameras are the R7, which is a much anticipated successor to the Canon EOS 7D Mark II, a camera that came out in 2014, a camera that people have been waiting a very long time for a successor. And there was supposed to be a 7D Mark III, but those plans were canceled along with the Canon 5D Mark V. So the successor to the 7D Mark II is supposed to be the Canon EOS R7, which we're getting on May the 24th with a new kit lens. And the kit lens, according to Canon Rumors, was supposed to be an RFS 18 to 45 millimeter f 3.5 to 6.3, and we didn't have any more information. Now for the Canon EOS R10, a camera that's supposed to replace the M50, at least that's what it seems like at this point, rather than a replacement for the M6 Mark II and 90D. Which is interesting there is the M6 Mark II has been discontinued, which is why we thought initially that the R10 was designed as a replacement for that, but the specs that we got leaked out kind of indicate otherwise. Well, thanks to Digicami-info, we now exactly know what those two lenses are. So for the Canon EOS R10, the kit lens as an option that's going to be announced alongside the Canon EOS R10 on May the 24th is the RFS 18 to 45 millimeter f 4.5 to 6.3, not 3.5 to 6.3, and it's going to be an image stabilized STM lens. Now for the Canon EOS R7, the kit lens as an option, because you can buy the body alone for both of these cameras, but if you go with it in a kit package, the kit lens for the Canon EOS R7 is the RFS 18 to 150 millimeter f 3.5 to 6.3, and it's also going to be an image stabilized STM lens. So in overseas, we're seeing a bunch of SKUs already. We see the body alone for the R7, we see the body alone for the R10, and of course we see a kit package for each with those two lenses that I just mentioned. So let's go back and take a look at the Canon EOS R7 and R10 and what these specifications are for both of these cameras. For the Canon EOS R7, the much anticipated successor to the Canon 7D Mark II, it's going to have a 32.5 megapixel sensor. We don't know anything else about that sensor. We don't know if it's going to be backside illuminated or if it's going to be backside illuminated and stacked. And we also don't know if it's going to be the exact same sensor found in the Canon 90D or the M6 Mark II. All that we know at this point is that it's going to be pushing the same resolution of 32.5 megapixels. But what is really interesting is the frame rate for this camera. It's capable of between 15 and 30 frames per second continuous shooting. 15 frames per second mechanical, yes, mechanical will be an option, and 30 frames per second electronic. That's faster than the Canon EOS R5, the R6, and the 1DX Mark III. However, and this is a big however, it's not going to have CF Express card slots, so it's going to be limited to the speed of a V90 SD card. And not only that, but the buffer inside the camera, but still just holding down that shutter button for half a second or even a second is going to deliver you up to 30 frames. And that's a lot. I've done some shooting with the macro lens, the 100 millimeter, when I'm shooting insects, and sometimes I'll just hold down that shutter button for half a second or so. And after shooting a couple of insects over a couple of hours, you'd be surprised at how many images you come up with. I came up with 1,000 images. It took forever to go through and find out the right one that worked. 30 frames per second electronic, 15 frames per second mechanical. It's still very, very fast. I don't suppose we'll be able to shoot for more than 2 or 3 seconds before the buffer fills up, but still that's absolutely fast. And of course, it's going to have IBIS. That's right, in-body image stabilization. The 90D didn't have it. The M6 Mark II didn't have it. The M50 doesn't have it. The video specs also look promising. This camera is going to be capable of 24, 25, 30, 50, and 60 frames per second in 4K. It's going to have the option of Canon Log 3, and I got to tell you, Canon Log 3 really opens up a whole new level of dynamic range on these APS-C censored cameras. We never had Canon Log before, and it's truly amazing. If you're shooting in 8-bit right now, and you've been shooting in 8-bit for a long time, the first time you go to Canon Log 3 and you start shooting in that log profile and you see what it looks like once you take it into post, you apply a lot, it's just amazing. When you take a picture, even of a sunny day, and you see some trees in the distance or close up, quite often with 8-bit, it's very dark. You don't get a lot of detail there. But to be able to get all that detail, to be able to see the detail in the shadows as well as the midtones and the highlights is truly impressive. And along with Catalog 3, we get HDRPQ. Did I say it right this time? Yes, HDRPQ. I can never say that right. I usually say something else instead. So 4K up to 60 frames per second, but we can also shoot up to 120 frames per second in 1080. Previous rumors were saying we were going to get 240 frames per second or even 180, but latest specs from validated known sources are telling us we're going to get just 120 frames per second. But we did get 120 frames per second in the Canon 90D, and of course, what happened? Well, focus was locked. You couldn't adjust the focus, and that was kind of annoying. Although on an APS-C censored camera, quite often I'd be shooting at a higher f-stop, so it really wasn't too big of a deal, but still, having your focus locked, hopefully with a Canon R7 with a faster processor, it's going to have the Digic X processor. This should be significantly faster so that the autofocus won't be locked. Pretty impressive specs. And of course, we're getting the announcement on May the 24th. Have I left anything out about that camera? Talked about IBIS, 2 UHS-2 SD card slots, dual pixel autofocus, no surprises there. And I do suspect it's going to have dual pixel autofocus too. The same autofocus system in the R5, the R6. I can't see Canon doing what it did with the Canon EOS R5C because that's a very different camera. It's using the cinema operating system, and it was getting basically the latest cinema operating system. This is going to be a stills hybrid camera, so dual pixel autofocus too. And what we can deduce from that is we're going to get all the wonderful autofocus things. We can focus on people, animals, vehicles, animal eye detection, bird eye detection, subject detection, torso detection, all those wonderful things. Canon makes one of the best autofocus systems out there, so this should be really good for the Canon EOS R10. Sorry, not the Canon EOS R10, the R7, but talking about the R10, that's the next camera we're going to talk about. We don't have nearly as many specifications for the Canon EOS R10. It's going to have a 24.2 megapixel APS-C sensor. And if you recall, that's kind of exactly what the M50 had, not what the 90D and the M6 Mark II. They had a 32.5 megapixel sensor. So this is why we're thinking this is more of a replacement of the M50 and not the M6 Mark II, which was recently discontinued. And of course, the Canon 90D is still up for sale. There's been no mention of that camera being discontinued. So the R10 is a mirrorless replacement of the M50. So a 24.2 megapixel sensor. And in terms of the frame rate, this is pretty impressive. In fact, if the R7 had these specs, I think we'd be pretty impressed with them. Again, mechanical, it can shoot up to 15 frames per second, but electronic, it is limited to 23 frames per second, but still impressive. Now, this camera doesn't have dual card slots at all. It just has a single card slot, and that's going to be UHS-2. Still pretty impressive. I can't get over those frame rates. My Canon R5, while it does have a bigger sensor at 45.7 megapixels, I'm pretty staggered that this camera is able to shoot 23 frames per second, even with a 32.5 megapixel on an APS-C camera. I'm going back to the days when I had the 70D, which was somewhere, around 7 or 8 frames per second. Then, of course, the 90D, several generations ahead of that, was able to do somewhere between 11 and 14 frames per second. So to be able to get 15 mechanical and up to 23 electronic on the Canon EOS R10, and then, of course, on the R7 to be able to shoot up to 30 frames per second electronic, truly incredible. Now, there's a lot we don't know here. There's a lot of specs missing. We don't know about the dynamic range. We don't know about the ISO range. There's a lot of details that can make these really, truly impressive cameras or just, well, an okay camera. And as we look to the Fujifilm X-H2S, this is, well, it's looking to be a pretty impressive camera. A 26 megapixel backside illuminated stack sensor, according to rumors, and to be able to shoot up to 6K video. Now, the Canon EOS R7 specs don't tell us too much. It says up to 60 frames per second 4K. Now, it could still give us 6K oversampled 4K. It could even give us 6K. It's just what has leaked out, what they've chosen to give us as our first appetizer is those specifications. These ones right along here for the Canon EOS R7. Those are what we've been chosen to give. And it doesn't mean that we're not getting more. It doesn't mean that there aren't more details behind this, and there are, and that's what usually makes a difference. Look, I love rumors. They're really exciting. I love covering them. That's why I got up here at 1 o'clock in the morning, not because I couldn't sleep and I found news, but I love covering rumors. They're an awful lot of fun, but when it comes to making purchasing decisions and making a final decision, it's always best to wait until announcement date, take a look at the full specifications, and then wait for channels that have actually done reviews like DP Review or Gordon Lang. These channels do a really good job of going deep diving into these cameras and probably already have them in hand. If we are truly getting them on May the 24th and no official date has come out at this point, we don't know if that Canon might just come out and dump them on us as they've done in the past. or they could do some sort of virtual presentation. We just have nothing at this point. And as I was saying earlier tonight when I was on live with Peter Gregg Live, I said that, you know, we've got all these leaked specifications for the Canon EOS R10 and R7, along with two new kit lenses for a new mount, the RFS mount. Yet we haven't heard anything since May the 10th. And normally what would happen, especially on the weekend before, we start to get more leaks. Well, here we are. We got confirmation of the lenses that they're image stabilized STM. We got a correction that it's not 3.5 to 6.3 on the 18 to 45 millimeter. It's 4.5 to 6.3. So I'm really hoping that as we go into the long weekend here, I've got Saturday, Sunday, and Monday off, that we'll get more leaked update specifications for the R7 and definitely for the R10, because we don't have a whole lot there. So super excited. And if you want to know the latest news and information on these two cameras, subscribe, but please choose all notifications. So that way, as soon as I publish a video, you'll get notification on the latest news as it comes out, the latest video, so you'll be up to date on the latest news and information. That's it for now. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you again soon.